So I wanted to say a huge welcome to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Cylvia Hayes, and I'm from Johannesburg, South Africa. And yeah, today is my first time to be able to host and facilitate the WEAll Talk, which happens on a monthly basis. But it's usually my network co-lead, Anna, who usually facilitates this conversation. And just for those of you who are new or haven't met me before, my role is really focused on memberships, and Anna's going forward is going to be focused more on hubs. So just wanted to give you a heads up on that. And for those of you who are joining this conversation for the very first time, we're really excited to have you. And for those who just mentioned that they're getting to know Wellbeing Economy and the Alliance for the first time, we're really excited to have you here as well. So just for some context, these conversations happen on a monthly basis, and we have members from a global audience who join these conversations, but also share specific topics. And this is really an opportunity for our members to share, but also for us to participate and dive into these discussions and really get a sense of what is being shared. So the topics have been really diverse and they vary. And that's what's exciting, is that we get to hear different perspectives from our members. And so that's why I really want to encourage you. This is going to be a 15 to 20 minute talk by our amazing host, Cylvia Hayes. And then we've got the rest of the hour to really engage and hear your perspectives and your reflections on this interesting topic, which is there a spiritual side to economics? And this is a question that we're wanting to ask and hear from Cylvia, obviously her personal experience and her reflections on this topic, but we'd also love to hear yours towards the end. So I'm going to kick into introducing Cylvia and sharing her bio with you. So she is a writer, a speaker, and a teacher in the areas of economic systems change and the living world, and personal and spiritual development. She is the founder and CEO of 3E Strategies, Cylvia Hayes Enterprises, and the founder of The Rethink. She's also a former faculty member in the Sustainability Department College of Agriculture at the Oregon State University, and also a former First Lady of Oregon. She's an award-winning environmental and anti-poverty activist and author of this book called When Life Blows Up, A Guide to Peace, Power, and Reinvention. So I know she's going to share much more about her personal journey and her experience with you, so I don't want to get into all the details, but I'm going to hand over to you, Cylvia. So I don't know if you want to just share a little bit about yourself and then share your screen when you're ready. And I'm also going to pin Cylvia to the screen so that she can be recorded more fully. I'll hand over to you.
All right. Thank you, Tobli. And thank you everyone for being here. This is my first WEAll Talk. And it's in the culture I was raised, they said, if you want to avoid conflict, you should avoid talking about religion, politics, and money. And I talk about all three things almost every single day, and we're going to be talking about them today. So it ought to be fun. I will share some of my views, and then I really am truly mostly looking forward to a discussion of this topic. A little bit more background. I'm coming to you from Bend, Oregon, which is in the sunny part of Oregon. And we're in a heat wave here. I know many of you UK folks have been experiencing it. Ours is just hit yesterday, and it's going to be pretty intense for a while. I was telling Anna and Tobli that I've had a very full, busy work week. I'm sure many of you have also, and I appreciate you being here. And right after this, I get to go indulge my new addiction, which is dog agility. So that's what's going on for me today. I am really delighted to be here. So is there a spiritual side to economics? Just from the few check-ins I've heard, I cannot wait to get other folks' take on it. I would just like to share with you all my take on this so that you know the lens that I'm coming through. I believe that spirituality is very personal. I believe that there is a significant difference between spirituality and religion. I'll touch more on that as we go forward. And as every wisdom teaching that I have ever studied suggests language is really insufficient for talking about this topic, other topics as well, but this topic, but we'll do the very best we can. I want to make it really clear that I do not claim to have answers to this, and I really don't trust anybody who does, because it is such a personal thing. It is a matter of faith. It is a matter of how we choose to relate to and move through this world. And if I offend anyone, that's not my intent, and I hope we can sort it out in the comments. I believe pretty much everything is faith. Atheism is faith, in my view, right? The economic model that we attach our lives to certainly is based on faith. And I believe right now in this, y'all, we are in the most difficult movement out there, really. We are in the movement to change the entire global capitalist consumption-based economy. That is a big lift. And I do believe that both religion and spirituality have been heavy influencers of our current paradigm and are potentially very important for creating a new and healthier paradigm. I will put it right out there. I was raised with very fundamentalist, hellfire, brimstone Christian upbringing that I rebelled from. What Tobile did not mention, this is where spirit has a tremendous sense of humor, because I am also just under a year away from becoming, after many years of study, an ordained Unity Worldwide Ministries minister. And the fact that I am even saying that still kind of cracks me up, because I had such an aversion to more organized religion based on my upbringing. My personal beliefs, and I'm going to share a slide about this. I'm going to sprinkle just a few slides in here, but mostly we're just going to have a conversation. My personal beliefs, subject to evolve as I do, are that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. I personally believe all beings on this planet are spiritual beings having their form of experience. I believe that all life is interconnected. I would describe my own personal spiritual beliefs as being far more aligned with indigenous and even what I would call pagan views. Pagan is not a bad word in my worldview. And I believe that there's truth in all traditions. I also believe that there is tremendously harmful distortion in almost all religions. And I believe our systems that we're operating under are reflective of that. I want to share very quickly this Einstein quote, because it pretty well sums up where I am coming from. I'm going to give you just a moment. And I should note that I changed pronouns in this. I do that because I'm frustrated with all things spiritual being given a masculine frame. I think that's a whole other form of microaggression. We can talk about that. I'm going to be quiet and let you read this now. Are we good?
Good, thanks.
Sure, yeah. So that's really kind of sums up where I'm coming from. I believe I will share that one of the reasons why I went down a ministerial path is that I had a little bit of an existential crisis in losing some faith that our governmental institutions are going to be able to bring about the shifts we need in time. I really do believe that what is needed is an evolutionary step in collective consciousness. And for me, that does not mean just retiring to the meditation mat. However, I got to get the meditation off the mat. In Unity and New Thought, we do a lot with affirmations. And there are a couple of us that are sort of burrs under the saddle pad in our movement, spurring more action. And we like to use the term, yes, we have to do our principles, and then we got to get off our affirmations, right? I'll cover a little bit more of that in a moment. I want to also give, in prepping for this talk, I thought this was fascinating. I'm going to share with you a slide that shows the definition of religion straight out of the Oxford Dictionary, and take in especially the last piece of this. So consumerism is the new religion. I was really a little surprised to find that in the Oxford Dictionary, but it is certainly totally aligned with what we are all working on. A defined set of beliefs. I'm just going to share from my perspective again, and then I hope that we have others of other paths that will share their perspective. I am in the United States. I am in a culture that is heavily influenced by the Judeo-Christian worldview. One of the most problematic for me aspects of that worldview is the creation story. And stories matter. That's why I'm going to share this. I'm going to come back to that. But in the way Christianity was presented to me, there's some scriptures in Genesis that are called the dominion scriptures. And probably many of you have heard them. It was about the creation story, and God created man in its image, and then told man to go forth and subdue nature and to have dominion over the fish, the creatures, the animals. I believe that there is a tremendous separation story in that interpretation of that scripture, and I think it has done tremendous damage. And our creation stories matter. You cannot, just like you can't lump all Christianity into one lump, you certainly can't lump all indigenous pathways into one lump. But I have studied a number of them and resonate with them. And the creation story is usually very, very different. It is more about humans being a part of, not a part from. We are birthed from nature rather than put in place over it to dominate it. And I think that that is significant. And I hope that we have people on this call who will be able to share from an indigenous perspective. These stories are our programming, right? They are our colonization. And I'll be straight up with you. I had a bit of a rough childhood, and there were a number of forms of abuse that took place in my childhood that required quite a bit of therapy. The one that I would say was the most difficult to move beyond and to decolonize from was the religious abuse of a person who was indoctrinated with a story that humans are a part from, that God is something separate and out there, and that there is this hierarchy and separation. And I believe that that is a fundamental underpinning of some of the brokenness in the human relationship with one another and the human relationship with the rest of nature. Again, I don't have an answer. I'm just framing some views, and we will go into discussion. There's another wonderful, I have just a couple more slides. I want to share this one from cultural historian Wendell Berry, because I think it's very relevant to where we are right now. I'll pull you up there. And I'm going to read this one. It's a question of story. We're in trouble just now because we are in between stories. The old story, the account of how the world came to be and how we fit into it sustained us for a long time, we could answer the question of our children. But now it is no longer functioning properly, and we have not yet learned a new story. I would actually alter that just a little bit to say we have not yet created a new story. And I believe that is part of the work of our movement. It's the part of the work that WEAll is doing in coming up with increasingly effective narratives for describing what's broken and what it might be like when we fix it. That's incredibly important. It's almost like we're in this pivotal moment in history where we need to develop a new recreation story. I think that's part of what we're all about. And I'll give you an example of this. I'll give you an example of consciousness shifting that many of, I'm a little too young to really have been there. I happen to have a lot of loved ones who were there, but the year was 1968, and astronauts Bill Anders, Frank Bauman, and Jim Lovell were on the Apollo 8 spacecraft. And it was the first crewed, I don't say manned, crewed spaceship to circumnavigate the moon. And Anders later reported that his fellows on the spaceship were really lukewarm about him having a camera and lukewarm about having to deal with taking pictures and whatnot, because they had so much else to do. And navigating for the first time ever a spaceship up and around the moon and back. And the point of the photography aspect of this was to get as many pics as possible of the moon. But I'm going to share something with you here. That was the whole purpose. The Earth was like secondary. But when they came around the backside of the moon, this image appeared. This image is called Earthrise. And in that moment, Anders says everyone on the three guys on the ship were just spellbound. And of course, this later became an iconic photo for our species. And while you're looking at this, I'm going to read you a couple of the things that the astronauts reported. They said, to see the Earth as it truly is, small and blue in that eternal silence where it floats, is to see riders on the earth together, brothers on that bright loveliness in the eternal cold, brothers who now know they are truly brothers. And another one, this little blue marble in the middle of all that darkness, at least for an instant, people looked upon themselves as citizens of Earth. This was one of those almost species-wide, certainly mainstream cultural-wide consciousness-shifting moment. This was one of the pivotal moments in birthing the modern environmental movement. It stirred a revelation in awareness. The story of Spaceship Earth took off as a result of that photograph, and the growing awareness that maybe we really all are connected, and maybe Earth is actually fragile and special and worthy of protection. I think it's up in the air what kind of a consciousness shift we are in the midst of right now, but we are in the midst of one. And part of it is, for the first time ever, this is a big thing, y'all. Think about this. For the first time ever, humanity has actually admitted that we are a causal force on nature. We have admitted, most of us, not everyone in my crazy country, but most of us have admitted that we are doing epic scale damage. The Anthropocene is a thing that we're talking about now, and not just people like us who've committed our whole lives to these topics. So we are in a consciousness shift, and we're in a time of increasing upheaval, increasing anxiety. That is going to be, I believe, a reality going forward. It's another reason why I have committed so much more strongly to to my own spiritual path, but also to this whole interfaith movement, which I want to talk about a little bit more in a second. But I just believe that our movement needs to be strong. We need to be resilient. All the spheres and movements that you all are part of and are leading and are influencing. I believe, however you define it, whatever your personal path is, I do believe having a spiritual practice right now is probably, in my opinion, more important than any point in my life. Let me put it that way. And again, it's why I stepped onto the ministerial path so strongly. I do not believe that protecting and restoring nature, our home, I do not believe that that is actually a political issue. It is a spiritual and moral issue, in my opinion. So I will put that out there. I'm about to wrap. I want to leave you with a couple of concrete takeaways. I have been in the economic system change movement for a long time. I am much newer to being in the what I would call the interfaith movement, but I'm increasingly excited about it because I have become more and more aware of some of the key players in the interfaith environmental and climate change movement. The organization Green Faith, if this is of interest to you, I would encourage you to check them out. They organized this year, excuse me, we have a frog that has entered our collective here. It happens to be residing in my throat. They organized a campaign really called the Sacred Season of Climate Justice, because this year, 2022, it turned out that most of the high holidays of most of the world's major religions all occurred between the end of March and May. And they pulled together, you can go online at Green Faith and find their catalog of statements of action on behalf of climate change and the environment issues by all kinds of faiths across the country, or across the world, excuse me. So Green Faith is one I really like. In the US, Blessed Tomorrow is doing some good work. It has more of a direct US political involvement and engagement from communities of faith perspective. Interfaith Power and Light is also very, very active and strong in the political system here in the US. And I believe that this is a really barely tapped power base for economic system change movement. And it's a good one because these interfaith movements tend to be intersectional environmental movements. They also bring in the social justice and racial justice issues, perhaps more fluidly, at least here, than some of the other NGO types. So I don't exactly know how this plays in all of your countries, but it may be of interest for you to check out that movement. I'm getting increasing requests to talk about this topic at these interfaith events. I just think it's a real potential for us to, again, to be some connective tissue and to grow the entire movement toward economic system change. And the last thing that I want to leave you with are just personal practices that I would highly recommend as someone who wants to see every single being in our movement effective and ideally somewhat happy as we do this work. So, you know, when I went through the whole crazy experience that led to my book called When Life Blows Up, I wrote in that if I had not had a meditation practice on, I might not have survived. And that's really the truth. And I say to anyone, if you don't have a meditation practice regularly on board, get one yesterday. It doesn't have to be big, but it's a life-changing practice. And it is absolutely essential to decolonizing our thinking and gaining the freedom of thought that will enable us to bring about a world that works better for all beings. For many of us, myself included, time in nature. I think a lot of us environmentalists spend so much time working to save the planet, we don't get out onto it enough. I think that that's a critical thing to do. And just staying open to the oneness, whatever that feels like to you. You know, nobody can prove there's a spiritual reality. No one can prove there isn't. I think it's very experiential. I know that I have had experiences where I have lost a sense of the individual boundary of myself. And I've had many of these, and I have been directly connected to a sense of oneness and vastness, and it's life-changing. So I would just encourage playing with that. And that's my last thing I'll leave you with. I'm a kind of a workaholic, actually, and I tend to say I work at this, but I'm actually now really reframing to use the term I'm playing at this. I'm trying to keep it more light, more playful. And I would just say, you know, it's a challenging time to be alive. It's also an extraordinary time to be alive on this planet. I long to be part of a human species that is a restorative force on Earth. And I think our movement is essential to having any chance of that coming about. And so I'm just delighted to be able to speak with you all today, and I will stop it there.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Cylvia. Yeah, I see little applause hands coming up there on the screen. Absolutely incredible. And so appreciate your reflections and your openness and your honesty and vulnerability is much appreciated. So I'm not going to speak so much because I want us to kind of reflect and share our thoughts and feedback on what Cylvia's mentioned. And I think then we can get into some questions as well. And I see there are some things on the comments, but I just want to open it up to first reflections from the audience. You're more than welcome to just raise your hand or unmute yourself. So Tam, I see you going first.
Yes. Well, I agree 100% with your statement. Appreciation of the openness and honesty. I'm 80 years old. I live in a lake in northern Michigan. And starting with the point of religion, spirituality, for 40 years, I've used that same distinction to say, oh, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
And 4 or 5 years ago, I said, it's just too vague for me. It's just not honest. It's not personal. So why don't I say what I really am, which is, you know, I'm self-identify, a colleague of the Dalai Lama for 40 years. I self-identify as a bodhisattva.
Mm-hmm.
I was influenced 1979 by John Blofeld, who was English, who in 1933 went to China to meet Taoist sages. And at the same time, Carl Jung was writing about Richard Wilhelm, that Richard Wilhelm brought the living spirit of the Tao to Europe, and we have to embody that.
Mm.
So I'm really comfortable using the term, and then we've got to have a term, so Buddhist, Taoist. And then we have to have some term for what's called the West or the Europe or America. So I use Gaia. So that's my foundation. And one little vignette which kept popping up, Cylvia, while you were being so honest, was my mother was a real Jesus person. She was a real Christian. And she was a peace person, like, because I worked in the Senate in the 60s to end the war in Vietnam. And she was a peace person like that. So we had that bonding, but my thinking in Tibetan and Sanskrit was not easy for her. So as kind of a gift from her to me, she sent me a cutout from a New Yorker, a cartoon. And you see the Dalai Lama scratching his head. And in front of him, you see the backs of 5 naked people. And the caption is, the Dalai Lama says, what kind of a Buddhist colony is this? And my partner, Martha, looked at and said, well, of course, that's the point. To be a Buddhist, be a Buddhist nudist. Just let people see right through you. This is what I am. Take it or leave it. No strings attached. So it's good to have a little humor.
We'll take it from a Buddhist nudist for sure.
Yeah, you're a Buddhist nudist. Okay. And in terms of the well-being, that mantra, which I 100% embrace, for me, that's the embodiment of Schumacher's Buddhist economics, which has been not at the side of economic transformation for me, but has been at the heart. The center is updating that. I appreciate your updating the language, Cylvia. So we could say local global bodhisattva economics, well-being, whatever way you use it. And then my last point, I want to come back to, you talked about language. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Hannah Arendt and her contribution to the humanistic stream from Germany and resisting totalitarianism and authoritarianism. Well, you probably, another person that you probably don't know, Barbara Cassine, who's a French feminist political philosopher, and she was the editorial director of a team of 150 scholars in Europe called a Dictionary of Untranslatables, which is looking at language to come up with a language which was appropriate for our emerging new consciousness. And she did a book on Hannah Arendt in which she said, Hannah Arendt said, I don't feel at home in the land of Germany, the German nation. I only feel at home in the German language. And by that, she meant the humanistic language. She didn't mean the state language. And that really, really resonates with me that we are creating a language where we feel at home based on the spiritual traditions where we feel at home.
We really, really are. I really appreciate that. We have some, yeah, we have some other folks with hands up. Thank you so much for speaking that into the group.
Okay, I'm done.
Thanks, Tam. Amanda, yeah, you wanting to share?
No, I really want to thank you for the wonderful presentation and also for your comments, Tam. You know, for me, this question around spirituality, religion, values was a lot of actually what got me into economics originally, because those assumptions of our human nature as being inherently, we're selfish, individualistic, materialistic, you know, where did those come from? And a lot of that, you know, that Judeo sort of Christian belief in original sin and philosophers that came from that tradition trying to then build this idea of how this like more meta system harnesses those innate negative parts of us into something bigger. And so for me, a lot of what's coming up here when you're talking about Schumacher and Buddhist economics is, you know, what if we don't believe that we're inherently good or bad, right? But that we have the capacity and we can build systems that encourage us, you know, and reward different kinds of behaviors. And how does this ultimately relate to, you know, our sense of meaning and purpose? Because right now, obviously, our current system encourages us to do well and not to do good, yes. And so how much we are ultimately always valuing the ways in which we value things within our society, which has been at the heart of economic like sort of discussions, always like what the water diamond paradox, what do we value and why, and how is that fundamentally based in ethics and our sort of, as you were saying, like Cylvia, those narratives, those stories of who we are and our connections with one another and our purpose on this planet and with one another. So some esoteric philosophical thoughts on it, but enjoying this conversation a lot.
It's kind of an esoteric topic, right? I mean, I appreciate, I wasn't sure how it would fly with this audience. So I appreciate everyone just diving into it because it is a little offbeat. You know, I would I would urge everyone also to remember that the root word of eco, which is the root of both economics and ecology, is home, right? I mean, that is what it's coming from, but we have allowed economics to come to mean something other than what can bring about a thriving world. Part of the work of our movement is to sort of redefine economics itself. I'll stop talking because we got a bunch of hands up.
Amazing. Bridget.
Thanks, Cylvia. I really resonated with what you said about having the most kind of sort of spiritual moments through meditation, mindfulness meditation. And that's certainly been my experience. My tradition was growing up was in a very progressive Anglican tradition, very committed to human rights and social justice. But for me, it was doing mindfulness meditation that gave me those, shifting that boundary between me and everything else that you describe. And I was greatly encouraged by the IPCC report that recommended the mindfulness initiative report, that pointed to it's not just about a technological solution, it is about us developing compassionate and kindness practices for ourselves.
That's new to me. Thank you for that. I'll check it out.
Yeah, for ourselves first, so that we can connect to others and to nature, because it's only when we feel part of it that we can take care of it. And the economics that we have, the model that we have, as you say, it's one of separation and one of delusion, that we're apart from everything, that we can extract and take from it. We're not looking after our home. We're not looking after our, the place where we come from that supports us.
For sure.
And the challenge is, how do we, and people have written beautiful things in the comments about, the slowness of this, and how do we, because it's by experiencing it for yourself, it is very much that you glimpse it, that you glimpse the connection. And it's lovely to see Salah on here in the last members call. I think it's Salah of the WEAll July program that's doing a program around young women and leadership. And one of the pillars, Salah will explain it, but one of the pillars involving that self-awareness and the self-care and practices. And so it's, how do we do more of this, do more of making the links of bringing us back to ourselves first, and the source of it all, and connection. So thank you very much.
I appreciate that articulation. That really, you just, I think, said better than I did. That's what I mean by spirituality. This work for me, it's a love affair. It's a love affair, this planet, and it's so painful to see what we're doing. And so I appreciate those comments.
Thanks, Bridget. And yeah, if you have the link to that IPCC report, please do share it on the chat as well. And I'm just going to say we have a few more minutes left, around 15 minutes. So if we can keep our reflections a little bit briefer, just to allow more people to share if they have something as well. So Hans, I'll pass it over to you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it's a very nice subject, this. There's so much to say about it. I have a picture of a light that appeared in a Buddhist temple in India. It's behind me. I don't know if you see it. Well, it's very small. It's very small, but there's light coming in from the sun, and I think light has appeared on the picture. So for me, that's a spiritual picture. It means yeah, oneness actually. And I wrote a little novelette or a novella, and it's called The Birth of the Novella. And a book is born in the book, and then it's about the doctor who helps with the birth. And it's a spiritual book, actually. It's about universal love. And then about economics, I wanted to say that a lot of spirituality from Asia and Latin America and Africa is coming to Europe and to Holland. Specifically, I know most of it, of course, I am Dutch, but it is always very often brought with a lot of money. You have to pay a lot for it, you know. So they bring it, they take it free from there and then make money of it, and that's economics. And I don't agree with that. I don't find it good. I think there should be an economic system that is more fair. And if it's more fair, if you share with other peoples on the planet, on the whole planet, with a new system, then I think that is spiritual in itself. So yeah, that's in brief what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Hans.
Yeah,
I just want to check if Cylvia, are you still here? Just looking at all the tiles, I don't think she's probably lost connection, but I'm sure we'll bring her back up. Nicholas, would you like to go ahead and share so long while I try to get Cylvia back on? Sorry about that.
Yeah. So I hope Cylvia listened to this part of the recording, because I wanted to thank her for a great thought-provoking presentation, etc. So the thing I just wanted to add to this conversation is around that whole collaboration. So there's many kind of recognize we have to collaborate, and then there is a collaboration that happens that we then become tribal. So our collaboration by its nature can become quite tribal. And as well as the work at the Five Institute around internal and external cultures, I'm also part of the No More Boxes movement, which is exploring how we put each other into boxes. Oh, you're a Christian, you're a this, you're a that, you're a woman, you're this, you're left wing, you're right wing, and the very nature of collaboration becomes tribal, and we then start to get more and more boxes, and therefore we don't then have any particular solutions. So the only thing I really wanted to throw in with you, with all the work that everyone is doing individually, just to be really, really aware of the constant thing of, I have just put someone in a box, or I've just put myself in a box. Or you hear someone say, well, you know what men are like, or you know what, we're the fundamentalists, they're like this, or the Republicans think this. And our response to it as an No More Boxes movement is just saying, well, some, not all. We know what women are like, this, well, some, not all. Or we know what they're like, some, not all. So it's just that level of awareness of how many boxes we are in ourselves and we put ourselves in, and how many boxes and then we create these all global things and become quite tribal. So I just want to suggest that people just play with that. And when you find you have put someone in a box, just apologize, say, look, I think I just put you in a box. Or you say, I think you're putting me in a box there. And it's we've used this language, we've done it at Capitol Hill with executives at Capitol Hill. And it's a really useful language because it's non-judgmental. Just put you in a box, I'm sorry. It's not punishing, or we're not doing wrong. So I just would encourage people to be aware of that within this bigger conversation of faith, religions, etc. Cylvia.
Sylvia's back, yes.
I'm sorry, my internet completely went out. I had to switch to my hotspot on my cell phone. I don't know what has happened there. And I'm very, very sorry. I think I missed some of Hans' comments there. Apologize for that. Nicholas, I was delighted to hear you speaking. What's your organization? I made a note to follow up earlier.
So I'm part of the Five Institute, and also
Five?
yeah, I'll pop it in the chat area for you. Hi,
I did
Richard.
it.
See,
I did
someone
it already
has-
for you, Nick.
Oh, thank you,
Thanks, guys.
Fanny. And then also part of the No More Boxes movement, which is this idea of that's what we're doing. And
I did
it's,
that too.
yeah,
5 and 6.
yeah.
Okay, thanks, you
Thank you,
guys.
Fanny. Thank you. That's me all done.
Thank you, Nicholas. John, we'll go to you.
You know, I think besides needing you know, really a powerful new story, we need some work on the pathway from the present system to the new system that we want. And I think there's a tendency to think that some of the perpetrators or the people that are running the current system as the enemy. And we Quakers feel there's that of God in everyone. But anyway, I think that we should not really condemn the people that are running the current system and try to figure some pathways. They may be well trapped in the system and they just played the game better than anybody else, but they don't know how to change it either. And just one example with oil, instead of a depletion allowance, which encourages faster drilling and more consumption faster and faster, a conservation credit to leave some in the ground for future generations, because we're probably going to need at least some for a long, long time. But I think there has to be some approach to addressing stranded assets and a pathway from where we are to where we want to be that is a moral approach. Thank you.
I really appreciate that. I don't know how widespread it is, but there is a pretty significant movement in the United States called a just transition, which is about that. It means just get her done, but it also means do it justly, right? Help, you know, pathways for people who are currently in the industries that need to be transitioned, etc.
Can you put that link in the chat?
I will try. Let's see. I don't have, because I'm wanting to have my best bandwidth for y'all, I don't have my internet up, but I will do that real quick. I'll try to find that. You bet.
Thanks, Cylvia. Let me know if you need assistance with that. Oh, I see
Got it.
some people are sharing. So Simon, while your hand's up. Did you just disappear?
Thanks.
Oh, there you are.
No, here I am. Yeah, thanks. And thanks, Cylvia, for sharing your journey. I think that's a powerful way of having a conversation around these things, because it comes from the personal and it's not preaching either to the converted or the non-converted. But I was struck by the idea of the creation story. I think that's fundamentally at the heart of a lot of the problems we face. So it's a story of almost of divine providence, which was so prevalent in the conquest of the West in the United States, but also from the colonization experience. And it's a story of dominance of white over black, of men over women, of urban over rural, of north over south, of west over east, of capitalism over communism or socialism. You know, the list is the market over the state. The list is endless, and I think, you know, more importantly in our field of work is the dominance of mankind over nature, and I think that is fundamentally flawed as a creation story, and you know, that world is dying. You know, if we refer back to Gramsci, who famously said something along the lines of the old world is dying and the new world is yet to be born, and we're in that moment, I think. Yeah. So it's I think the spiritual side of things is really important, because we're all in this together. You know, it's not one over the other. It's we're all in this together. And I'm struck by, you know, my experience in Bolivia. I lived for many years in Bolivia, and there's no way that the Bolivian indigenous culture ever could imagine dominating nature. I mean, for a start, nature is so hostile there. You know, hail, frost, lightning storms that would kill the cattle, extreme cold, very arid, mountainous terrain that didn't lend itself to agriculture. So they worship Mother Earth. I mean, it's just a completely different relationship. So I think we have a lot to learn from other cultures on how we deal with this. And it's no surprise that they are very strong in their spiritual side of things as well. The indigenous First Nation cultures. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No. That's it, Cylvia.
Well, it really resonates with me. I was in a conversation yesterday. One of the things that I find hopeful right now, and it's really taking place here in both the US and Canada, but elsewhere as well, is indigenous peoples are kind of standing up and saying, hell no. You know, we're here. They're on the cover of National Geographic right now saying we are here and we are taking back our lands. We are taking back our traditions. And I think we should be careful not to over romanticize any of it, but that's a really hopeful sign to me. Before we close, I do just want to show you guys a couple of resources I really recommend. This is the Sacred Economics book by Charles Eisenstein. He is I don't agree with everything he has to say, but he's a brilliant thinker. This is really worth checking into. His work is worth checking into. Probably many of you already know Vicki Robbins, Your Money or Your Life. This is more on the personal relationship to economy, prosperity, but it's got some spiritual basis in there. And then Lynn Twist with the Soul of Money Institute and Pachamama Alliance. This is one of the she's working with some of the indigenous cultures I mentioned. She is also just a beautiful, deep, rich thinker and speaker and writer. She's, by the way, now that I'm thinking of this audience, not only has she got really good content for this, but if you're running and working hard to fundraise your salary in a nonprofit, which so many of us have done and are doing, she's got some beautiful approaches to fundraising and development as well. And then finally, I would be remiss. This book was written by my dear friend, John DeGraff. What's the Economy For Anyway? It's a largely US perspective, but this is, in my opinion, required reading for this movement. And he's a really good writer. It's very readable.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks for sharing those resources. Nella, I just felt that, yeah, I saw your hand up earlier and I see you've shared a lot on the chat, but did you want to share any last comments or reflections based on what you were sharing? Don't know if you can hear me.
Put all in the comments. So yeah.
Okay. I just wanted you to have an opportunity to share your voice. All right, well, thank you. I think that was incredible. I just want to ask one last question. If there is anybody else that wants to share reflections, Cylvia, is there a way that they can get in touch with you or through your newsletter? How can they get in touch?
Sure, I'll put that in the chat too. I would love to have folks go check out my Transcend newsletter. I put the link in that. If you Google Cylvia Hayes spelled with a C, Transcend or Substack, that will come up. And then I'm also going to leave you, and again, my name is spelled strangely. I did not do that to myself. Thanks, Mom. But I would be happy to converse with anyone on this.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
We really appreciate you, Cylvia. We really appreciate your time and your insight and your thoughts and the fact that you are sharing from such a personal space as well. So we really appreciate the fact that you joined us and you got to share on this WEAll Talk. And I thank everybody that has joined this conversation also for your reflections. We really, really appreciate it. And this is the kind of thing that we're wanting, is to hear your reflections, to hear your input, and for the conversation not to just stop here. So if you're wanting to reach out to Anna or myself or Cylvia with further input or suggestions, please feel welcome to do so. And then I just also want to add that our next WEAll Talk that's taking place in August, it's going to happen on the 25th of August. It's with the Sweden Organization for Global Health. and they're going to be speaking about their experience with the banking system. So we think that's going to be a really interesting conversation. We'll share obviously more details through our website, through our newsletters and other platforms, Slack, etc. But yeah, we'd love you to join that conversation as well. Anyway, that is it from me. Thank you so much for joining, and the recording of this session will be shared as well on all our platforms. So feel free to share that with your community.